The sweet tones of the violin, entirely real in this case. But the instrument is far from conventional. It's the product of a sophisticated investigation into wood and varnish, which aims to reproduce the materials used in the golden age of Italian violin making, when in the 17th and 18th centuries, the famous Strads and Guarneris were made. Violinist Zina Schiff's instrument owes its sound first to a piece of spruce wood, but treated in a particular way, like the darker sample on the left. It's crucially different from the lighter piece, which was seasoned by air drying, as Joseph Nagyvary, chemistry professor at Texas A&M, explains.
If I drop this wood in a tank of water, as you expect, since it has a low density, it will float there, and it will float there for years. The air is trapped inside. Now, in contrast, this is a sample of Italian spruce, which I have procured personally when it was green. When the tree is green, it is full of saps and liquid, and there's very little air in it. So for that reason, when I place this wood now in water, since it has high density, this green wood will sink.
If kept wet, the green wood is very slowly decomposed by naturally occurring microorganisms. Suspecting that the old violins were made from wood like this, Nagyvary begged some shavings from a restorer of fine instruments. When examined in the electron microscope, the shavings, these are from a famous Stradivarius, revealed a characteristic pattern. Magnified about 2,000 times, the wood structure is seen to be filled with open holes. The so-called pit-hole membranes are missing. The same open pit holes can be seen in Nagyvary's own wet-seasoned wood. But this dry-seasoned wood, the kind that modern violins are made of, has solid, closed-off pit holes. Nagyvary believes that the old violin makers couldn't help using wet-seasoned wood because it came from Venice, center of the wood trade, where the merchants kept their logs in the sea.
The idea that Stradivari went to the mountain top with a hammer in the hand, knocking on the trees, is obviously very naive. It was much more efficient for him to do the selection in Venice, where there were thousands of logs available to him.
Another old sample, but now it's the varnish that's under investigation. Under the microscope, Nagyvary made a startling discovery: tiny mineral crystals from gemstones of various kinds. He set about making his own gemstone varnish, grinding up semi-precious crystals and then separating out the finest particles using this flotation process known to the old alchemists as levitation. It all made sense. Gemstones had magic properties to the alchemists who ran the chemistry trade. A fine varnish bought in Venice could easily contain gem powder. Nagyvary believes the stiff gemstone varnish complements his wood. The resulting strong but light structure responds quickly, produces great power, and the gemstones in the varnish filter out irritating high-sound components.
I believe it may be a sacrilege to suggest, but I honestly think that the old violin makers did not know anything more about violin making than the new violin, the modern violin maker. They have bought their wood in the supply houses, just like the modern maker, except their wood came from Venice, which was processed in the sea. They have purchased their varnish and varnish ingredients in the chemical supply house in the drugstore in Venice, and the varnish was made by the chemist there. They had no personal knowledge of either wood or varnish. They were just the lucky beneficiaries of the greatest historical coincidence.
This is the violin that I played on. this weekend.
Nova asked Zina Schiff to visit Ben Kudlak, who used to look after the violins of the great Jascha Heifetz. Zina herself was Heifetz's student.
The varnish is very nice. I like a redder varnish, personally.
This example uses the Nagyvary wood, but not the gemstone varnish.
But the work is excellent. Good work. The typical Guarneri's Del Gesù copy. And I would say, you hear this, these are ringing very good. The two top strings are dead. That's because the sound post inside is in the wrong place.
That's what he said.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that he knows it too.
Kudlak couldn't resist making the fine adjustments necessary for best performance. Next, a very recent model with both wood and gemstone varnish.
And I don't know what they put in this varnish, but I don't see any beautiful color in it. There's no color in this at all. It's not colorful to look at. When you take any of the old masters, you see that gorgeous quality in the color, the beautiful quality, and it's thick. This is it's like, well, it reminds me of the varnishing the bottom of a boat.
The appearance was not well received, but the sound.
Boy, the overtones now, you have to hear those overtones, they're deafening. This sounds much better than the other one to me.
That's what he said. Even though it's only 2 weeks old, even despite what some people say, that the older ones, but he said this one's going to be better.
That's right.
And then the real thing.
Well, that's a beautiful violin. That's the Joseph Phyllis Andrei Guarneris, made in 1740 about, wasn't it?
Yes.
About 1740. Now look at this varnish. You see that rich gold, that golden brown color? All this is original. And from here, where it's worn off from playing, it's still protected. The wood is protected.
Looks good and sounds beautiful.
That beautiful, rich sound.
The old violin will always be Ben Kudlak's favorite, but we asked him how the sound of the Nagyvary violins compared to other modern instruments.
I think they're better than most of them that I've heard. In fact, I haven't heard any that are better than this. I've heard quite a few of them, but I don't think they're better in quality than this. This sound is better than most of the new ones I've heard. Maybe better than all of them.
Judging fine violins is, even in this computer age, a subjective business. We left the newest violin with Ben Kudlak. He wanted to make some adjustments and fit a new bridge, and he went to a Zina Schiff concert. His conviction was strengthened. It was, he said, the best new violin I've heard. Perhaps Nagyvary's onto something, but he's a controversial figure, unpopular with dealers in fine old instruments who like to ridicule his ideas, but he doesn't seem to mind.
I have had many thrills in my life, surviving World War II was one of them, but this is clearly a highlight to hear a brilliant player in one of the great concertos of all times played on my violin.
Perhaps the best attitude is Zina Schiff's. Beauty, after all, is in the ear of the beholder.
How do you measure this? It's very difficult. To me, it's what I hear in my ear. And with the audience, if they think it sounds great, am I going to argue with them?